Hey, how you doing? It's Tom Breeze here from tombreeze.com, and today I'm down with Nici Marx, and Nici is a presenter, has worked on BBC News, on Sky, and also on CNN, amongst many other things. And today I'm with Nici. I'm going to ask her a few questions about how Nici got into presenting and what she does right now, and hopefully we can pick her brains and get some top tips. So first of all, Nici, thanks very much for inviting me down, and I suppose, do you want to give me a bit of an insight into how you got into the world of presenting?
Yeah, it was something I was always very determined to do, having been put off by careers advisors at school.
Yeah.
But I was absolutely focused on getting into television in the end. And I started in local radio. I managed to batter down the door into that and become a radio journalist and then a news and programme presenter. And I did that for 6 years and then made the transition into regional television as a reporter. And then I was recruited by Sky News, having done a little bit of freelance work for them as a reporter, and I was at a train crash in London reporting every half hour live into Sky News, and the then head of news came along to see how this little rookie recruit was doing.
Yeah.
And liked what he saw, and he walked up in his broad Aussie accent and said, "Do you want a job?" And we negotiated in the car what he was going to pay me. And shook hands, and then I went back to do another live two-way into the programme from the site of the train crash. So that was my entree into national TV news reporting.
Brilliant.
And then after about a year, I'd just come home actually from a reporting shift, and there was a call from the newsroom saying, "We need you here desperately, the overnight presenter's gone sick, come back in." So in I went, having never presented a live TV news programme from a studio before ever, although it's something I sort of aspired to. I wasn't quite sure whether I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
But there I was, I had no choice, so of course I said yes, I couldn't say no. And I walked into the studio, and it was my very first time presenting a live TV news programme.
Yeah.
It was also the auto cue operator's very first time, and the auto cue didn't work.
Oh no.
So there I was, faced with a half-hour news programme live in front of the nation, no auto cue. Luckily you have your hard copy scripts, but it looks odd because you're forever looking up and down, you know, from the camera to your script. And it wasn't just the one programme, it was 5. You have to do 5 overnight programmes at Sky News. We did it that time anyway. And I thought, if I was nervous before I did this programme, before I did this shift, I will never ever be nervous about presenting a news programme in the studio again, because the worst that can happen has happened.
Yeah.
I didn't have the support struts I needed, and I had to fall back on my own resources, and I did it.
Yeah.
And I clearly did it well enough, because I then became a full-time presenter.
Fantastic, yeah.
So that's how I got into TV presenting.
Okay, so one of the key things that one of my clients asked me recently was how to handle those tough questions. So for instance, they're in a business at the moment that their department hasn't had the best of years, and as of the credit crunch I suppose, and he knows he's going to get a lot of tough questions from his CEOs, from managing directors, wanting to know exactly how to overcome those tough questions and come out the other side looking very good. What advice could you give to that person?
What's important when you're faced with a tough question like that is you can't whitewash bad news, and nor should you try.
Okay.
If bad news is out in the public domain, let's say your company's had a poor quarter, it's in the public domain, there's no use in denying it. Because as far as the media is concerned, if you try to do that, then clearly you're trying to hide something, hide bad news, and that's when the media knives will come out.
Okay.
You know, sorry is okay in the media. It's all right to be sorry, it's all right to hold your hands up and say, we had a bad quarter, we did something wrong, we handled it not as well as we might have.
Okay.
But then you've got to focus on your key messages, and what are the key messages? That's the positive.
Okay.
The key message is the positive, it's how the company is moving forward. So you acknowledge the bad news, because that's okay, it's being honest, and your audience will thank you for that. They'll give you, some credence for actually acknowledging the bad news. But then you're going to focus on how the company is moving forward and what mechanisms you have in place to improve the situation. And not just with financial news, as you've just given me that example of the company that had the bad quarter. Let's, for example, think that your company has, it's a chemical company, and it has spilt chemicals into a river that runs through an area of outstanding natural beauty, and that it's killed loads of fish. Well, of course you can't deny that it's the chemicals from your company that cause that, unless it genuinely wasn't, and that's unlikely if you're the only factory on the side of that river.
Yeah.
However, what you could do to counteract that negative news is, and make it happen, obviously, is to say, of course we're clearing up, of course we need to clear up the river and we need to restock the river with fish, which we are currently doing. And in addition to that, we're setting up a wildlife sanctuary, and we are spending company money, X $500,000 or $1 million or whatever, setting up a wildlife sanctuary in the area so that people can enjoy the nature. So again, you're showing your audience that you're doing something positive. You're looking beyond the negative, which you're going to address that, but you're then offering something which is very positive.
So you leave them with that positive key message, I suppose.
That's very important, because remember, when you have a media interview, you really only have about 3 minutes if you're lucky, if it's a live interview. Yeah. So it's very important to concentrate on what your key messages are going to be and how you're going to deliver them. And even when you're hit with a negative question, which is really tough, then yes, acknowledge it, but then deliver the key message. Because the more times you can come back to your key message, the better. That's what your audience is going to remember.
Okay, I see. Okay. And what about when there's a lot of tough questions that may be a little bit controversial? So if someone asks you a question that is almost a little bit loaded, so they're looking for a negative answer straight off, if that makes sense. What sort of advice could you give for that, if those sort of questions come up?
I think perhaps you're talking about something like the built-in premise.
Exactly, yeah.
And the most well-used example of a built-in premise question is, are you still beating your spouse? Well, okay. Why is that? Well, it's because if you say yes, you're damning yourself, and if you say no, you're damning yourself.
Exactly, yeah.
But let's bring it back to perhaps a little more reality if you're being interviewed through the media. Let's take that example of a company that perhaps has had a bad quarter, and perhaps as a journalist I might ask a question which runs something like, what are you doing to compensate for the fact that you're being outmanoeuvred by the competition? Well, the built-in premise is that you're being outmanoeuvred by the competition. So what are you going to do? Well, it's not your responsibility to actually address the built-in premise, because it may be true or it may be false. Let's assume it's true. Ignore it, sidestep it, deliver your key message.
Okay.
So what you're going to say might be something like, we are always striving to improve the performance of our company and to deliver to our customers exactly what they want. Our customers tell us what they want, and this is what we're working towards. Okay, that's very general, but you get the idea.
Yes.
So you're not acknowledging at all the fact that you're being outflanked by the competition, which is what the interviewer has asked you.
I see, so you're remaining open to answering those questions, but at the same time you're delivering your key message, if that makes sense.
Exactly that.
Okay.
If someone, for example, comes to you with a question which apparently is based in fact, and this is something we journalists do quite a lot, and I've done it over the years. You will present some facts, or inverted commas of facts, as part of your question to fish for some information from the interviewee that will make a good soundbite. Now, it may be that your fact is not a fact at all. Okay. And the reason that we will use this technique as journalists is because we're very busy. We're working in 24-hour news. It's a huge, hungry machine. It's a sausage factory, 24-hour news, and you don't have time to research. So you might read something very quickly on the news wires, and you take that into the studio with you. You might misread it, or it may not exist at all, and I might say to you, Tom, I believe that 25% of your clients aren't very happy with the work you do. Now, for you, that's clearly nonsense,
yeah.
Of course.
Let's make sure that's clear. Yeah.
But you might answer that, well, Nici, I haven't seen that research. I, of course, will be very happy to respond to your question once I've seen those facts and figures in that report. But until I've seen that, I'm not in a position to answer your question. So what your audience is hearing is that you are very much willing to answer the question, but until you have the facts and figures at your fingertips, you are not going to put yourself in a position that could be difficult for you and your company and your image.
Perfect.